If the echoes of that lost world still linger, then so does its warning. Every age believes its light will never fade, its knowledge will save it, its monuments will last forever. But the earth remembers differently. The stones remember. The seas remember. Perhaps that is why these stories survive. Not to frighten us, but to remind us that creation itself is fragile, that what was lost once can be lost again. So if you feel the pull of forgotten ages, the whisper of civilizations buried beneath your feet, follow it. Question what you've been told. Seek the voices between the verses, the spaces between the lines. Because truth doesn't disappear. It only waits for those willing to listen. In the next chapter, we'll follow the traces left by that first world, the ruins, the myths, the silent testimonies carved in stone and scripture. What we uncover may change how we see not only our past, but our future. Stay curious. Keep questioning. The lost world before Eden may not be gone at all, only sleeping, beneath the dust of time, waiting to be remembered. What if every civilization is merely a breath in an endless cycle, a fleeting dream between awakenings? The world before Eden might not have vanished completely. It may live within us, hidden in the deep structure of our minds, in instincts we do not understand, in memories that surface only through myth and déjà vu. Perhaps that's why humankind builds the same monuments again and again, pyramids, ziggurats, towers reaching for heaven. We are haunted by the shape of something we once knew. Our hands remember what our histories have forgotten. If the gap theory holds even a fragment of truth, then Genesis is not a record of creation's first dawn, but a story of renewal after ruin. The darkness before "let there be light" is not absence. It is aftermath. The void is not nothingness, it is consequence. And maybe, just maybe, the pre-Adamic world was not punished but permitted to end, to make room for something new. Every beginning demands an ending. Every resurrection requires a tomb. Eden, then, was not a new garden, but the regrowth from scorched soil. Yet as we gaze at our own age, our towers of glass, our machines of light, our thirst for power, can we be certain that we are not living in the last pages of another forgotten world? History does not end. It restarts. The question is not whether there was a civilization before Adam. The question is whether we are becoming the one that comes before the next. If the pre-Adamic world truly existed, its destruction becomes more than a story of divine wrath. It becomes a mirror held up to us. Perhaps every cycle of civilization carries the same seed of brilliance and the same shadow of pride. In myth after myth, across every continent, the pattern repeats. A golden age of wisdom, a descent into corruption, a cleansing flood. It is the rhythm of creation itself. Build, fall, begin again. Imagine the world before Adam not as a rival humanity, but as an earlier reflection of what humanity could become. They mastered the elements, reached beyond their station, and touched the fire of heaven. And as with every being that reaches too far, the light consumed them. Maybe that is the real lesson hidden in Genesis. The Garden of Eden is not a physical place, but a memory, a symbolic reconstruction of what was lost. Adam's exile is the echo of a much older exile, the exile of an entire species that forgot its humility. The serpent, the fruit, the fall, these are not mere allegories of temptation, but archetypes of recurrence. The pre-Adamic race may have fallen through knowledge misused. Adam was given the same choice, obedience or self-exaltation. One world was destroyed, the next was warned. In this view, Genesis is not a beginning, but a continuation of a cosmic dialogue between creator and creation, order and chaos, awareness and arrogance. Every ruin buried beneath the soil is not just a trace of stone, but a message that the universe remembers, that consciousness rises and collapses like the tides, that every age thinks itself the first and forgets the ones that came before. Perhaps the forbidden fruit was not about sin, but about the memory of the knowledge that once burned too brightly. Perhaps God's act of creation was also an act of mercy, rewriting the page but leaving faint letters beneath the new ink. And if those letters are still there, beneath our myths, beneath our bones, then the story of the world before Eden is not finished. Look closer, beneath the words, beneath the centuries of translation, beneath the story we have been told. In Hebrew, the second verse of Genesis does not simply say, the earth was without form. The word used, haya, also means became. The sentence could just as easily read, and the earth became void and desolate. It implies a transformation, not a beginning. Something had already been there. Something was lost. Many scholars have quietly entertained this thought, though few dare to teach it aloud. They call it the gap theory, a hidden era between creation and recreation, a period erased from memory. In that void, they say, an earlier world flourished, one that met an unspeakable end. If this is true, the first act of Genesis is not creation, it is restoration. The 6 days of divine labor were not the construction of a new universe, but the rebuilding of a broken one. What then destroyed it? Ancient texts offer fragments of an answer. Isaiah speaks of a world laid waste, of a land without inhabitants. Jeremiah describes an earth void and empty, echoing Genesis word for word, as though recalling an older cataclysm. And in Ezekiel's lament over the fall of Lucifer, we find a being placed in Eden before Adam, a guardian who ruled a perfect world until pride consumed him, and the world itself was consumed in flame. Outside the Bible, the whispers grow louder. The Sumerian kings list records rulers who reigned for tens of thousands of years before the flood. The ruins of Göbekli Tepe, buried intentionally 12 millennia ago, rise like the bones of a forgotten empire. And under the seas, off the coasts of Japan, India, and Egypt, lie the outlines of cities carved long before recorded time. These are not random coincidences. They are scars, traces of a civilization too advanced, too ancient, and too uncomfortable for history to acknowledge. Perhaps these people, these pre-Adamites, rose to heights of knowledge and arrogance that shattered the balance between creation and creator. Perhaps the darkness in Genesis 1:2 is not symbolic at all, but literal, the smoke of their own undoing. Every fossil, every submerged ruin, every myth of gods and giants may be a memory of that world, a civilization not erased by nature, but by judgment, a reset, and when the dust settled, only silence remained, until God said, "Let there be light." According to the version of history most of us were taught, everything began in perfect order. God spoke and light answered. Waters divided, lands emerged. Life took shape. First the creatures of the sea, then the beasts of the field, and finally the crown of creation, humankind. Adam, molded from dust, breathed into by divine spirit, was placed in a garden designed not merely as home, but as paradise. Eve followed, born from his rib, bound by love, by innocence, by purpose. They walked with God among the trees, their every need met, their every thought untainted by time or fear. It is a story of beginnings, of simplicity, of divine intention, clean, unbroken, complete. Yet even within this official account, cracks begin to appear. The text of Genesis is not one seamless narrative, but two overlapping perspectives. In the first, humanity, male and female, is created together, in the image of God. In the second, Adam stands alone, sculpted from the earth before the animals, before Eve, before companionship. For centuries, theologians have tried to merge these differences, calling the second story a closer view of the first. But what if they are not the same event at all? What if these two accounts hint at two different creations, two beginnings, separated by more than words? The story we call Genesis may not be the dawn of life, but a restoration after ruin. What if the first chapter describes a vast, collective creation, a world that thrived and fell, while the second tells of one man chosen to inherit what remained? Somewhere in the quiet between those verses, the world we have forgotten may still whisper. Before we can chase the shadows of a world that came before Eden, we must first return to the words that define humanity's supposed beginning. In the book of Genesis, it begins simply, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep." Two sentences, so familiar, so ordinary, that few ever notice the impossible gap between them. If God created the heavens and the earth, perfect and complete, why then, in the very next breath, does the earth appear ruined, empty, submerged in darkness? This puzzle gave birth to what theologians call the gap theory, the idea that Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 are not two moments in a single event, but two epochs divided by an unspoken catastrophe. In that silence, some believe, lies the memory of a pre-Adamic civilization, a world advanced, ancient, and ultimately destroyed. The Hebrew text itself deepens the mystery. The phrase "was without form" can also be read as "became without form," implying transformation, not origin. The earth, once vibrant, became desolate. Something happened, something powerful enough to reduce creation to chaos. For centuries, theologians have debated what could have filled that gap. Angelic wars, cosmic judgment, even the fall of Lucifer. Yet perhaps it was something else entirely, a civilization undone by its own ambition, swept away before the page was turned and Adam took his first breath. The story you are about to hear will ask you to question not only Scripture, but the memory of the earth itself, its fossils, its forgotten architecture, its silence. Because within that silence may lie the remains of the first world humanity ever lost. What if the story you learned at Sunday school, in school books, and in countless retellings is not the beginning, but a second chance? Imagine a world that once teemed with cities whose spires pierced the sky, a world of knowledge and craft, of towers and machines and temples, everything annihilated until the earth lay empty and without form. Picture ash drifting over seas where marble capitals once stood, inscriptions half buried beneath layers of silt, and the faint, impossible echo of a language that memory refuses to speak aloud. What if the chapter labeled Genesis is not a creation myth in the way we assume, but a restoration, a deliberate act to repair what had already been shattered? What if Adam and Eve were not the origin of humanity, but survivors placed into a newly ordered world, heirs to a blank page written over a more ancient story? Tonight we begin to pull at the loose threads of that overwritten past, to follow hints left in Scripture, in myth, in stone, and to ask whether the silence between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 conceals a civilization erased from the record.